Hi, everyone. Thank you. I know it's a long day. Thank you for staying back and listening to this. Before I start, I just wanted to get a general sense of the folks here. How many of you are managing data teams or data science or data analytics or BI or whatever? It's great. That's a good mixture. That's wonderful. One of the approach that I want to take with this talk is I want to keep it open-ended. What I mean by that is my conversation, I'd like to call it a conversation with all of you, is going to be, I want to kind of explain to you, or at least give you kind of my journey, the context where I come from and where, why I come up with some of these models or some of these thinking with the framework around that. And the later half of today, depending upon how this goes, I would like to keep it open for everybody to kind of chime in, because I would like to learn from you, from all of you, as much as I'm sure it's a great opportunity for us all to learn from each other. So that's the kind of approach that I would like to take. So we'll see how it goes. And don't be shy, ask questions along the way. So today's kind of, I kind of like to kind of give you kind of a roadmap of what we're going to be doing for the next, at least talking for the next 45 minutes or so. So I just want to give you some background and context, and I would like to kind of walk you through some of the terminologies at a very quick, high level. And I'm sure you've heard for the last 2 days. Your mind, I'm sure, is filled with all kinds of information and terminologies, and you name it. I'm sure a lot of it is contradictory as well, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but just to provide context. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some real-world scenarios, meaning there is this high-level concept of what the theory is supposed to look like, what data science is, what data analytics is supposed to do. But these are some of the things that I have seen in my career. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then also provide you, a little bit of a conceptual model of what, based on my experience, what I believe is a good way forward. And definitely, I would like all of you folks to challenge me on that, and maybe we can learn through that. And the last part of it is where all of you come in. I'd like to look at it more like a experiential discussion, kind of based on your experiences. I would definitely love to hear more about it. And just to provide you some quick context of where I come from, my background. I have held various titles over the last couple of decades. Been in this field, as you can see, various hats I have worn, and I've been in this field for quite a while, worked across a lot of different companies, and that's a selection of the companies that I worked at, which are more relevant to today's conversation. Started my first foray in that in search when I used to run the search architecture team back when it was Monster, when it was still relevant and still around. And this where we search analytics and all kinds of interesting things we did at that time. And again, over the years, I worked at Staples. I ran one part of their the e-commerce part of the group. I managed a team. We did a lot of interesting work, did the whole search related work there, as well as a lot of analytics as well, as you well could imagine. And at edX, I managed a mobile team. We built out our first mobile product for edX. And of course, analytics is front and center to all of that. Our learners throughout the world see what are the kind of analytics we get, and the concept of data czars, and there's some interesting background there. And then Sonian, it's a small startup that I work for text analytics, and currently at Adobe, where I am leading a small team of data science, data analytics. You can fill in the blanks. So that's a quick background. And this is my favorite. When I first kind of got into this field, I actually managed to spend some time reading the exploratory data analysis. If you had a chance to read that, I would highly suggest you read that. This is John Tukey's work. He goes back a long time, and I'm not going to read this out, but I think it's pretty obvious what it is in terms of how a lot of us have this constant desire to look at the data and make sense of it, even though it really is not telling you what you want it to tell. And this another one here is the wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Again, Herb Simon is a very famous economist. And again, these two are one of my favorite ways of looking, or at least I feel that it's the most with all the hype that's going around, everybody talks about data science and it's going to change the world. Really, when it comes down to it, these folks have been talking about it, doing it for the last 30, 40, 50 years. So what we are doing here today, what we're talking about today, is really nothing new. So I highly suggest you just go back and look at that. Again, as I said earlier, the terminology is just going to be a quick run-through of this. I look at data science, I don't want to go through this again, I'm sure you heard enough about it, but I like to look at it as what does it fundamentally enable? Like at the end of the day, it's creating data product, right? Whether the product is internal or whether you're selling it to an external entity, at the end of the day, it's all about data. And it's the value creation from data, extraction, processing, and then generation of value from that data. So that's the data pipeline, if you will. And you've all used data products. I mean, at the end of the day, Facebook is nothing more than a data product, right? I mean, if there weren't folks putting in their information, there wouldn't be the existence of a Facebook. That's kind of self-explanatory, but it's there. And also the other thing is, how do you kind of distinguish it from statistics, right? It's a much more holistic approach. Again, this is one of those things, the reason why I flashed earlier, both Herb and John Tukey's thing is they've always been talking about it. Don't look at statistics just from a purely modeling perspective. You need to look at it from a holistic point of view. So anyway, that's the message that I would like to get across. Again, a lot of us talk about data modeling, right? How do you build data models? What are the things that inputs into the data model? And more recently, over the last few years, I've been kind of spending a lot of time trying to understand what the business model is. What are the business thinking, right? When you use concepts like, for example, my favorite is Clayton Christensen's, especially I'm sure most of you have heard about him. His more recent work on jobs theory, or the theory of jobs, wherein you really think about how you're going to pull somebody's product into your workflow, into your world. How are you going to hire a particular product to do the job, right? So it's an interesting, the reason why I bring that up is, at the end of the day, we can all go and crank numbers out, right? There's all kinds of numbers. You can compute, you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. But if it doesn't add value, either for a business entity, it could be profit, nonprofit, it could be in any world, right? Really, it's about value generation. So the overall goal here, again, is to produce strategic, actionable insights. I mean, if nothing else, to me at least, that's the most compelling thing that kind of stands out. And again, the other side of it, I wouldn't call it the other side, but there's this thing called data analytics, right? You got data science, you got data analytics, and again, it's all about, how do you interpret data? How do you discover interpretation of meaningful patterns in data? And you're looking for patterns, there's a whole concept in CS, it's called concept of pattern recognition, right? How do you recognize patterns in data? So some of this is all related to that. And again, there is this concept of EDA and descriptive analytics, wherein you look at the data, you have the data, you summarize data. Well, you're basically summarizing it, and that's more of a descriptive side. And then you want to play with the data as you kind of walk through it. And there's the exploratory side of it. You want to show that up either through Tableau or whatever the visualization mechanism of your choice is, so people are able to figure those things out. And then there's, of course, the inferential side of it, which really takes it to the next level. It's not just the fact that here's data, here's static information, and the information gets shown, but here you're actually going to infer something from it. You're trying to look at it from either from a predictive side of it, or any other mechanism in which you want to take more than just the data, and then you correlate, and then there's the causation. There's that entire chain of that as well. And again, there's this, people talk about, ML, NLP. Now, all that, I kind of put it under the rubric of advanced analytics, right? There is that whole side of the equation wherein it depends upon the maturity of your organization, where you are in the maturity cycle. A lot of the larger organizations like Google and so on and so forth, they have really moved up the ladder a lot faster than most other organizations are. So they're doing some really interesting work along those lines. And of course, it all comes down to data analysis. And this is one of my other things from Gartner. The there's a lot of data assets that people are collecting, right? I mean, it's not just collection of information, not just from your products, but devices, right? They're generating this data. It's the machine-to-machine data generation, and then translation and processing. So all of that is, there's so much of information. How are you going to try to get nuggets of information out of it? I mean, this is really the challenge around that. And of course, everybody talks about insight. As we kind of walk this one down further, the real key there is we need to first and foremost try to figure out what insight means. And that's always in the business context, always in the context of your organization, always in the context of how your organization is evolving and growing and what do you want to do with it. And again, there are different kinds of data analysis. One of my favorite is from, if any of you have taken Johns Hopkins Coursera classes, there's some really interesting classes there made to go through the descriptive, exploratory, inferential, predictive, and causal analysis. So I would suggest to you kind of go through that if you're interested more deeply about it. Or we can talk a little bit later as well. And again, using graphics, basically using graphs to describe and visualize data forms, and that forms the basis of what we call as exploratory data analysis. Again, here's another terminology, which is, this is being used for decades, right? BI. When you go and talk to folks who've been doing this for a while, talk about BI, the first thing that comes to mind, it's a data warehouse or data mart or OLAP, OLTP, cubes, you name it, right? That's what comes to people's mind. Technology gets in the way. And so, then creating dashboards and metrics and KPIs, those are kind of synonymous, or at least used very closely with the concept of BI. You're going to see more of that. And a lot of time it's used interchangeably with business analytics, since analytics seems to have, and machine intelligence and all that seems to have cut the imagination of everyone. You kind of use that rather interchangeably. Now, this is something that over the years that I worked in different organizations, you have either seen, heard, variation of this theme, right? Somebody comes to you and says, I just need those numbers. I don't really care anything more about it. Just give it to me. Give me what I'm asking you for. And a lot of the times, nobody really cares about your analysis. It's like, give me those numbers, and I'll figure out what I need to do with it. Because there's some exec somewhere asking me for these numbers, just send it to me. And I will use it in my Excel or Pivot or do whatever I want to do with it and, make sense of it or write up my own story around it. And then there's this, one of my favorite thing is, my gut tells me that this is not right. This is just, what you're telling me is not right. This data is not right. Go make the data work for me. I mean, it really, it's always interesting when I hear something like this. It kind of really irks me at the same time, and also at the other end of it, it really bothers me that people haven't really thought this one through in terms of really having the data-driven culture or a data awareness, thoughtful data awareness around that. That's what I find that is missing. And from a visualization perspective, you're always going to see people as managers, including, I'm going to put myself in there as a manager as well. So they always say, pie charts. Everybody loves pie charts, right? Put this in a pie chart. Make this look pretty, or put this in this color. It's just disheartening, especially when you're doing some of this work, and then you realize that it's just not the right way to look at things. And then again, it's always the case where either my VP or senior VP or whoever it is comes to and says, I want those KPIs, I want those numbers, create those KPIs. And they're like, well, where do I get the data from? I said, they don't really care. Make it look good. Make me look good, or whatever, or a variation of it. So you're always going to see those things. And so anyway, these are some of the things that I've heard, I've seen. I'm sure some of you have heard variations of it. Anybody care to opine or provide some your own thoughts around it? I'm sure we can talk more. Hopefully, don't be shy, please. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
No derivation about where that result came from.
Yeah.
No lineage.
Yeah.
What's the point of that conversation?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You've gone through the effort of doing it, and so you just make me. So they come in already with the number in their mind, right? They're thinking that they're already like saying, "I know this is the number that I want. Can you sometimes just make it work?"
Or like, yeah, your numbers are wrong.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Another thing that happens is like how one analyst will do some query, find, oh, maybe it looks a little bit like this, send that to someone saying, yeah, I looked at it, it looks a little bit like this, but I'm not sure about this. They send that to someone else, and then eventually, 10 people later, it's become gospel.
That's right. Yep.
And people say, oh yeah, that's the threshold. It can't be below 4.5, or it's done.
Yep.
But meanwhile, that analyst was like only like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. We need to look more into it.
That's right. Yeah. That's a good point. Yep. Go ahead.
So I guess I just wanted to push back a little bit on the one regarding the gut instinct. Do you really not see a role for intuition from domain experts regarding models that potentially highlight or identify issues that have been pre-existing model?
I'm glad you brought that up because some of that is intentional. I intentionally wanted to stake a position here by calling that out. I mean, at the end of you think about it, right? At the end of the day, a manager has to make a decision, right? A decision is made in qualitative, quantitative, in a combination of those, right? A lot of the times, the instinct. Again, if any of you read Daniel Kahneman's book on, it's about type 1, type 2, right? Your initial gut instinct is, hey, I know this because this is the world I've lived in. I know this is, your mind is already biased in a certain, you're anchoring your thoughts already in a particular direction, right? Now, what this data allows you to do is at least push back against that initial bias and say, you may want to go back and think about that. It's just like one of those things. It just allows your mind to kind of balance itself out and reset that thinking. And as more and more of that data starts pouring in, that's contrary or to your, then you'll start to formulate thinking behind that. That was what was the thinking behind. Make sense? Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
I view a problem that I don't see up here. It's a nice problem to have, but equally scary, is an over-reliance on what the model is doing. So
No.
you ask to build a model, you build a model, and you say, great, we'll take that and deploy it. And
Yep.
wait a minute. The team that built this has no domain experience whatsoever
Mhm.
of this. Are you sure we should try this out a couple times and talk about what it's doing and make sure that you're comfortable with the results it's having?
Yep. Yep.
It's much better than having these problems, but it's just scary.
It is. It's scary in a different way because now you are deluding yourself into thinking that model is actually helping you come to an answer, right? Which in a certain way is even more scarier than coming in here thinking that you didn't know about it. Yep.
So one thing I noticed about not all of them, it's not the pie chart example, but in all of these cases, if somebody knows the answer they want, and the data aren't being used to provide a conclusion or to support a preconceived notion of what the truth is or should be or what they want to be.
Yep.
And that's really frustrating, where they know what the answer should be, and the reason for asking you is confirm their belief.
That's right. Yep.
In their mind, that shouldn't take very long. They already know what the answer is.
Yep.
All of the time spent justifying that is just something that just costs.
Yeah.
I wonder how people realize that if you come to the data science team, you might not get the answer you want, and you should at least be open to the data taking you someplace where you can get
Yeah. A lot of the times, organizations, when especially as a top-down mandate that says, we're going to be data-driven, we're going to start to make decisions based on data, right? I mean, it's such an open-ended, it's such a blanket statement. Even people who are saying that don't fully comprehend or understand what that means. And that means that if the data that I'm consuming, if somebody's coming in, that the team that we have allowed or team that we have nurtured and developed to provide us with the information, if you're not getting that, if you're not open to it, like kind of have a growth mindset around it, an open mindset around it, then it really doesn't help. It all comes down to culture at the end of it. I mean, you can have all the data, you can have some of the most important things out there, but at the end of it all, it's the culture. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well as we go through it. Any other things? Okay. I mean, again, here, it's one of the things I want to talk about is a little bit of the conceptual model, at least the model that I kind of think about it as I look at teams, as I look at when you're building up whatever, whether it's a data science, a data analytics team, you know, in my mind at least, I look at, you know, the three approaches doing it, right? It's people, process, and technologies. I mean, nothing new here, but I'm trying to layer that in the context of this conversation. Again, you know, when we talk about people, I mean, the composition of the team, right? What is it that you would want, the kinds of people that you want on the team, the skills that you're looking for, right? Of course, there is the, you know, I don't have to explain what that means, but, you know, you have the statistical approaches thinking about it. It's a mathematical side around that, right? There's computational skills. Somebody who's able to use Python or R, whatever it is, and skills that's going in and figure things out. And not only that, but also there's the whole pipeline of data pipelines, building those things out. And to me, even more interesting is that whole concept of a consultative approach, like a business consultative approach. To me, I think that's one of the key things, because we have a lot of hard skills. People come in with a lot of hard skills saying, I can create this model. I mean, that's like one of those things. Everybody wants to go and create, oh, I'm going to learn this new thing, I'm going to start using it. I know pandas and whatever. You pick a technology, right? You say, I want to do that. But you really forget the reason why you're doing it. At least in my experience, I've seen a lot of people, you just get so caught up in the work that you've done. You really need to think about, what is this data for? What is the context of that? That's kind of a, so when you come into an organization, you really need to understand the domain. You really need to understand where the product sits in the overall pipeline. Why are you doing it? What are you doing it for? So, and of course, visualization, right? I mean, that's really a key component. How do you communicate? I'm sure a lot of you have heard and maybe taken Tufte's thing. I mean, people like that have written books and compendiums around this for years. But again, visualization is one of the key things as well. And you know, some of you may be a little surprised to see a process being included there. But you know, as with any organization, as the team grows, as if it's more than just one or two persons working on it, you need to have a mechanism how you're going to work on it. I mean, this is no different from any teams, right? Whether it's application development, software development, you name it. You know, these are some of the approaches that I have personally been a part of and run teams using these approaches. So that's why I have them in there. Except for the last part here, the data science process. That was something new that, at least that new to me. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes, and next I talk about that just a little bit. From a technology perspective, again, nothing new here, R, Python. And you know, we at Adobe we have a massive data lake. That's what we use there. We use Hadoop. I'm sure most larger organizations have a variation of that. And then our front end, primarily experience have been using Tableau and you know, and Matplotlib, whatever it is, you know, some other variations of that, either using Python or R. Visualization goes through it. But Tableau is one of the approaches that at least my team has used. So any comments on this? Any thoughts on this? Anybody? Okay. And this is the data science process we were referring to earlier. And to me, the reason why I kind of pulled this one out is basically what this whole thing here is basically what, you know, Hal Varian, I'm sure you've heard of Hal Varian, who's an economist at Google currently. It's the, you know, the ability to, you know, take in data, to process, extract value from it, and to visualize it and to communicate it. I mean, at the end of the day, you can have all kinds of processes, but this is that is the fundamental tenet that drives that. And you know, where exploratory data analysis is one of the key things, where that kind of plays a lot of role in there. Data processing is done coming out of it, and then of course, everybody's favorite thing is to build this, right? Models and algorithms. I mean, that's the reason why we go out and hire, all the PhDs, and we need to hire ML PhDs, and you name it, right? Everybody wants to go out those things, build out those models and algorithms. But a lot of the time, you don't realize that 70 to 80% of the work is being done outside that. It's in collection, processing, data wrangling, you name it, right? All kinds of things. You torture the data, right, to basically make it work the way you want it to do. And another key element here is, again, it's interesting. I plucked this out of the Wikipedia. The funny thing is this making decisions part here seems to have lost a lot of its luster there, right? I mean, it's like one of those things like I'm dangling down here. It doesn't have its own little box to stand out for, which is another reason why I brought that up. I mean, that's one of the reasons, right? I mean, if it weren't for this, why would you do any of those things, all of that there? You can have all the process in the world. You can hire all the teams in the world. But at the end of it all, it's making decisions. If you didn't have this, what kind of decisions would you be making? Is it better? There's the feedback loop. That's missing here as well. So, any thoughts on this? Anybody? Okay. And again, this is the, of course, everybody wants a unicorn, right? We want everybody on our team to have all of these skill sets. And I intentionally put this dot because, I mean, you could add your own thing. We want this, and we want somebody who is basically able to do everything under the sun. I'm sorry about that. It seems to have cut off there a little bit. But, statisticians with deep quant knowledge that goes in there, right? And they want a whiz guru, somebody who is able to create compelling visualizations, go through that. So you have all these kind of notions that we want to hire these kind of people. But the reality is very different, right? I'll talk a little bit about the hiring. Like, what do you want to hire? What is your thinking behind that? Another key thing here is the team design. I use the word team charter. Again, as soon as I heard the word charter and team, I'm sure a lot of you roll your eyes and think, oh, you're not team charter. What does it mean? What does it apply to? So then I used a more modern term, design thinking, right? Everybody wants to do design thinking. Basically what it is a team design. How do you design a team? And, again, more generic term of team goals. The most important thing, when you're hired, and as a manager, I'm speaking from my perspective, my journey, when I take over, when I'm either, provided a position to either run a team or take a new job which has this team built up, one of the first things I always ask is, why does the team exist, right? What is the reasoning of the team? Is it just, what purpose does it serve? Does it just so happen that some executive somewhere decided, oh, we need a data science team because my competitor is using it or my competitor is building it, right? You really, really need to know, as managers, we really need to know what was the thinking behind the creation of this team or the putting the team together. And basically, what impact does the team have on the rest of the organization, right? If the team is built just because for the sake of saying, we just want some numbers, we're gonna ignore you. We're just gonna use those numbers. We're gonna put that away in a nice slide deck and then forget about it. What's the point, right? So that's another key thing. You really need to know that. And also, the stakeholders, right? Do they trust the analysis that you're making? And this comes down to the point that you were bringing up earlier, some people were bringing up earlier, right? If nobody's going to use it, or if they're not going to trust what you're producing, then what's the point? So, nothing new here, but I just wanted to kind of put up some of these things. Go ahead.
I'm a big fan of team charters, and I think
Yeah.
that a lot of people I've met at this conference so far are working on newly developed teams or startups. And the startup that I work at, we had an analytics team about 2 years ago, and nobody quite knew what our responsibilities were except for about the 5 of us.
Yeah.
And so nobody knew what to come to us for or what to expect from us. I now manage a team, and it's very clear
Yeah.
where we begin and end. Not really for us, but for everybody else in the company.
Yeah.
And that makes our lives a lot
great. I couldn't have said it better. Good point. Yeah.
It's really easy to have a charter, but then to become disillusioned, and like lose faith in it. It's
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, sure, we have these values, or we do this.
Mm-hmm.
What are the key things you see towards keeping the faith?
Yeah. So one of the approaches that I have used, right, and not necessarily at Adobe, but some part of it as well in other companies that I've worked for, you kind of have to constantly revisit that. Meaning, one of the approaches you could take is put the entire team together and saying, oh, hey guys, what do you think we should be doing, right? I mean, this is from a concept from a ground up. As a person who's working on this team, how do you see your role impacting the rest of the organization, right? So you kind of build that up from the team, from the individuals in the team, saying, what do you want to do? And then what you do is, from that, you come down, the few things, like, 2 or 3 high-level things. This is what we want to do, right? Whatever it is, yeah. We want to do more of work with either customer service or sales or whatever, with that department, because we want to impact how the sales are generated, how the revenue is generated, or how the subscription model works. You name it, right? You fill in the blanks, right? So you could have those things in there. And then after that, what you do as a manager, people who are responsible for that, is then you take that information and then you flow it up the chain. Meaning, this is what the team is saying that they want us to do. What do you think? Director, you name it, fill in the blanks, VP, whatever it is. That's what I have done. I've taken it up and said, here's what the team wants to do. What do you think? Is this what you have in your mind? And you kind of do a feedback thing around that and go back and forth. And you refresh that process over and over again. And then if there are, in the process as you go through it, there are times when people would have committed to doing certain things, which they're not going to do, right? And then you bring this up and say, by the way, here's what you and I had talked about. Here's what you'd agreed to, and here's the gap. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're going to listen to you, right? They may not listen to you once, twice. But the point of it is then you start tracking that. After all, we are metrics. You start tracking those things, right? And then you start making a thing about it and say, and then you'll reach a point when if too much of that happens, then you could have a more serious conversation. Then why are we here? What is it we're trying to do? What is the impact of that? It's a data-driven approach. Again, we love data, so we want to do it in that way, right? So you actually gain credibility by doing that. I have found that the starting it's going to be hard. It's going to be a little, I don't know if you want to do that or not, but I think you'll be amazed with some of the good things that comes out of that. Okay. Anything else? Yep.
One of the bullets up here, it says the team bought into the goals. So, I mean, who's defining the goals? Isn't that usually like a product owner for like design? And then you're looking for value to the customer or
Mm-hmm.
maybe doing short order iteration. So isn't there some upfront, something to shoot for in data science?
Yeah, that's a really good point you brought up there, right? The teams that we have product owners, right? The product owners comes in and they have a certain mindset. I want you to produce these reports. I'm just throwing it out there. Ad hoc report, I want you to do this. There's an exec meeting going on. I want you to do this, right? Now, when I come and talk to the individual folks on the team, they're like, well, you know what? Those reports, they're fine. I'll do it. But that's not really interesting to me, right? It's not something that, gets you up in the morning to come into work. I'm like, for what? For creating a report so that I can put it on the dashboard? I mean, really, that's not, it's not enticing. And you're going to lose people if you start doing that, right? So one of the approaches that we could do is saying, hey, what does the team want to do? And then take it up to the product owner and say, hey, by the way, the team that we have here, they are interested in doing these things, A, B, and C. If we don't do those, you should not be surprised. A few months down the road, they're not going to be there. It's a conversation that needs to be built on trust, and that needs to be built. But I think having that honest, transparent conversation is the only way out of it. That's my suggestion. Okay, great. Okay. And this is the kind of mental model that is the way that I think how a team's organization should look like, right? I look at this part over here, the foundational skills, right? I mean, obviously we talked about business context, business domain, whatever. You can put in your own rubric over here, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of it, it's the domain level expertise. That's what that basically means. And we talked about, having the ability to think about it, not just as a raw data, but you want to do more than that with that. So this whole, I don't want to go too much into that, but I think if we can talk more about it. And then there is, of course, the presentation and communication skill side. This is the soft skill. This really is. But it's not. But it's something that a lot of folks don't really spend time on thinking about it and growing that kind of outlook and mentality. And you really need to look at that in the same level and the same level of intensity as you would looking at any of the other things. So I look at these as foundational. No matter who you hire, you really have to have these three, a variation of these three should be part of your thinking, part of the thinking process. Because if you don't have any of these, then you're really going to be in a world of hurt as you start scaling up there. Now, what these things here is, you could go off and hire somebody who's really, really strong in visualization, right? In data engineering, more software engineering background, and then computational, ML, whatever you want to call it, fill in the blanks there. So these are the verticals, right? The vertical skill sets wherein you're really building up your bench strength in your teams or in your organization. But everything has to be layered on this foundational skill. At least that is my mental model, and that's my experience in that. Anybody disagree? Any thoughts? Any or variation of this? Go ahead.
Do you see a role for product management to play in this team, either as a participant or advisor?
Absolutely. In my experience currently working at Adobe, we are really good. We are blessed with one of the best product managers that I worked with, right? So he is, for all intents and purposes, part of the team, part of the hiring process, part of all that rolled into it. So in that way, you really don't want to treat product as a separate little thing that sits on the side, right? You really want that kind of ownership, that kind of, so if things go wrong, not if, it'll always, something's going to go wrong at some point, right? And then you're part of that thinking. Now you're part of the solution. You're always not going to sit on the sidelines and complain about it, right? So, that's a tactic which you would do no matter what, if it's this or any other team building thing. Okay? Yep, go ahead. Yes. That's right. Yeah. That's one of those most overlooked things. And then you will pay for it in so many different ways along the way as you go through it. Yeah.
Domain knowledge can be hard to walk in and have if you're going to a new vertical.
Yep.
Surely that one has to be a little more flexible if you train someone.
It is. And that's where the emphasis when any new hire that comes into is actually to embed that person, either the product organization, part of the product, and at least do on a rotational basis, or at least set up a mechanism in which you pair the person up to work with the product manager or with the developer or with that, right? Make it a part of the person's progression, right? When you make that saying that, for progression, when you have comp plans and all those things that comes through with it, right? Make it a part of that. And so in that way, you basically, tier that. You basically focus on that. That's really, that's why I call this as foundational. You really, really need to get these things in place before you're going to see any benefits. Yeah, go ahead.
I mentioned this earlier, but I was wondering, given a team of data scientists, how do you measure the level of skill? Their communication skill, their data skills, in your experience?
That's a good question. It's a hard question, right? Because there's no real answer to that. But what I can tell you is, when you look at the makeup, and that's why I talked about the team charter, talked about the team goals, all that drives where the emphasis should be on, right? Like if the emphasis is primarily around, hey, you know what, we just need to, I'm just throwing it out there, just I want to create dashboard, just want to create this. We don't really need people with this kind of skill set, right? And that's okay. But you also need to look at from a strategic point of view, where are we going as a team, as an organization? And then you start looking at it and saying, can we grow our own bench skills? Can we start to train others within the team to get to that next level? Or do we need to hire somebody who is really good in this particular area, but who has these foundational, skill sets, right? Who can then come in and train others, and then you start building up that bench strength around the team, and then you start doing that kind of knowledge sharing and knowledge skill of that. So you kind of have to look at it in both tactical and strategic terms, and that's what's going to play into part of your hiring thinking. Does that answer your question? Okay. There's no real right answer, but it's all about principles and how you deal with that. Okay, I've been told it's getting end. Okay, let's see. Okay, and again, there are variations of this theme. What I mean by that is, you can either build them out as foundational, as we talked about, or you could have, you can start doing it in parallel. I mean, I wouldn't suggest doing this approach, basically saying everybody on the team now needs to grow at this kind of a vertical kind of a mindset. It's good in concept, but you're not going to see a whole lot of, I haven't seen a whole lot of value coming out of it. And what I mean by the sliding scale here is, especially if you're starting a new team, this is not a bad way to go about it. And especially if you're just in there, then the scale slides up as everybody starts building up at the same level of the knowledge. And I think we don't have time for open discussion questions. I didn't realize that we got 3 minutes. Okay. So does anybody have anything? I just threw in these questions. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
In your experience with teams, have you experimented with like large open space collaboration areas with your data science teams, and who were the key collaborators that were in there?
I have had experience in a variation of what you just described. In a lot of the places that I worked at, it's usually geographically dispersed, right? Makes it more challenging. But in my experience, not necessarily in the data science, but in the software development world, having everybody co-located, I think, which is what you're getting to, increases the productivity of the team tremendously. I mean, there's no, that's a no-brainer. It's definitely there. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yep.
The very product of my company is ultimately a data analysis.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that we wonder about structure-wise is, do we consider data science a separate team that develops the analysis and then throws it over the wall to engineering in order to productize? Or is the data scientist themselves responsible for integrating that into the overall system? Have you seen best practices in this? And if indeed the data scientist is also supposed to be a software engineer, how do you find that skill set?
Are we probably out of time, right? 2 minutes, okay. That's a hard one. So I have worked with, the current makeup that team currently is at Adobe. We are a separate team. Even though we are part of the engineering as an organization, we're still all focused on creating data. So the challenge there is our product owner plays the role of interfacing with other product owners who in turn manage the backlogs for all the other development organizations as they go through with it. So this is like one of those situations where a product owner then talks to the other product owners in terms of, hey, we want you to do this kind of instrumentation, or whatever it is. We need to be able to capture this data, this event is coming in here, we need to dedupe that, whatever, you name it, right? All that is then flows through from that product management kind of a thing, because they control the levers of what gets in. That's in theory, right? In the sense that that works partially. But the reality of it is, the actual data engineering, people who are actually developing these products, they really know some of these systems really well. So we are challenged right now in the sense that our team is now going to start to embed themselves as part of these engineering teams to be maybe sit with them for like, on a regular basis, whether it's whatever the mechanism is. And that's the only way you're really going to understand how those things are instrumented, where the events are actually getting created and done. So that's part of the maturity, that's part of the growth of the team. At least that's the trajectory that we are in. That may not completely answer your question, but at least that's the journey that we are in. Okay? Luckily, the team that I manage is all co-located. They're all in the same room, so it makes our life so much more easier.
Do you have any suggestions for other sources to find out about best practices for managing data science teams, like books or other technologies?
There are. What I'm going to do is attach those to this slide deck and make it available, so you can actually do that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.